Hello and welcome to Scaled Down Customs. On the workbench today is an extremely rare treat. I was asked by Mark Gustafson to help him build this kit up for a book that he's doing. And after the last Mustang project, you can check the card up in the corner, I was a little hesitant. That kit was a struggle. But when he explained to me what he was doing, of course I was honored that he would ask me to help him with this build. So what we're looking at is an extremely rare, this is the earliest 1955 kit from Monogram, number 83, issued in 1963. This kit featured factory stock elements, but more importantly included parts to build a custom hardtop or a partial bubble top to reflect the influence of Darrly Starbird, who had been appointed Monogram's custom car consultant by that time. There's a picture of him there on the box. Custom bubble top that you can build, comes with some lake pipes, a little bit of the box art there, some other custom parts you can add into this car. The two custom versions of this kit were featured in Monogram's hobby store, the custom car lot in 1963. So this finished model will be featured in Mark Gustafson's book, scheduled to be out mid-2024, on Starbird's famed custom bubble top show car, the Predicta. And if you want some more information about that, the book and the project that Mark is working on, you can go to that website at thepredictaproject.org, and I'll put a link of that in the description below. That's all just one word, thepredictaproject.org. Anyway, so again, extremely rare kit. I am honored to be able to help him build this out for his photo shoot for the book. Here's a look at the instruction sheet that comes with the kit. You can see you've got a few different options for customization: hood scoop, additional brake light, some lake pipes, and evidently you can do this in 4 different tops: scale hardtop, the convertible, the continental roof, and then of course Darrly Starbird's bubble top. And that's the one that we're going to be building out. Just a few more different pictures of some instructions on applying decals. So a little bit more of a write-up on the car itself, Mr. Starbird, and the exploded parts view with the different options that you can add in, and then the instructions. I like how they list kind of not just the part and where it goes, but how to actually build it out. That's nice. Very cool. Yeah, very cool. All right, so we haven't settled on a color yet, but since I am going to be building the Darrly Starbird bubble top edition of this build, all of this side trim has to come off, and I need to trim a little bit of the windshield supports and add a couple other things, these extra fenders and some of the other custom parts that come in the kit for the Starbird build, or just however you want to build it out. But that's what we're going to be doing, so that's going to go on here. I'm going to be masking and painting those windshield supports. Of course, these wing windows need to come out. Yeah, anyway, so first things first, before I can paint the body, all this trim has to come off. So that's what we're going to do first. All right, so I got all the side moldings, the side trim taken off. I still have a little bit of cleanup to do under the front headlights, and I'm sure I'm going to need to do some trimming on the tail lights. But I did get the side molding taken off, and also the molding around the doors, that if you're going to do the bubble top, you have to take those moldings off the top of the doors as well for the bubble top to fit. So, and to do that, as you saw, I used my Tamiya scribing tool with the chisel blade. I love this tool. I use this scribing tool a lot. I think this is the 0.02. Anyway, the medium ones. And then, as you can see, you can get different blade heads for it. And I really like this chisel blade head. It just scrapes off like copyright moldings, stuff like that. Takes it off like butter. But I didn't want to get gouge into the body too much with this, so I just kind of took the bulk of the material off with the chisel blade, and then moved on to, as you saw, my power drill with the sanding disc on it. Pretty aggressive disc, and then I just kind of moved up to 400, and then just used my sanding sticks and my emery boards to kind of flat sand the rest of it off. So that's where we're at right now. We're getting close to get this thing into primer, but yeah, I need to figure out the tail lights and the front headlights there, smooth that off a little bit more. Also, it calls for the bubble top. You have to remove the wing windows and the windshield support on the fronts there. And before I even did that, I broke the windshield mount across the top because it's so fragile, and I'm handling this pretty aggressively to get all this molding off. Broke that, so I put some Tamiya extra thin cement on there, let that dry, and then I kind of reinforced it with some super glue and then sanded that down a little bit. Left it on there just a little bit thick on the bottom just to add a little more strength. But, you know, of course, I always have to do something like that. And then I still have some mold lines on the front to clean up a little bit. So making progress on the body, but yeah, that's where we're at. And then also for the Darrly Starbird edition, it does call for these fender skirts to be glued in, and there's no real supports for that, or they just kind of, as far as I can tell, they just kind of set up in there. So I'll glue those on with some Tamiya extra thin cement to get a good bond on there as best as possible before I prime it. I'll add some strength with maybe some styrene, strip styrene on the back of that, just to add a little more strength to that, maybe if needed. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So let's keep going with that. All right, so making progress, but the more I look at the reference photos, the more I realize I have more to do. For example, if I want to do the rear roll pan, which I do want to do the front and rear roll pans. For the rear roll pan, if I can figure out which way it goes on, I have to remove all this material. And then I've got to add some fins here to the back of here. And then evidently I need to take out these front marker lights as well. So I'm going to keep working on that, and then I've just kind of been working on some other things too, like kind of getting the engine block assembled and some of the other pieces prepped and ready for primer as well. So I'm going to keep working on some of that and check back in a little bit. All right, got the front turn signals smoothed off, and I guess it's a good thing that I scribed out all my panel lines, because now I need to fill those front ones back in. That's going to be fun there on the inside. So I'm just going to use some automotive grade finishing putty because I don't want that shrinking when I prime it and paint it. So I'm just going to fill that in with some automotive grade putty and sand those off. Then install the fins and we'll be ready for some primer. I did get the rear pieces cleaned out a little bit, but what I realized doing some test fitting was when you fit the chassis in, it fits up in the front nicely, but the back end, the frame rail is extended out too far. They extended out actually past the bumper a little bit, which would prevent the rear roll pan from sitting flush against the body. So I had to do a little trimming on the frame rail there to get that to fit. So I'll have to glue that in once I get it all together, but that was another fun little challenge. But anyway, so I'm going to get these filled in, smoothed off, the rear fins added, and then I think we'll be ready to start priming this thing. All right, I'm going to let that dry up and then sand that down and reapply if needed, but this stuff dries up pretty quick, so working time's pretty limited. All right, that's it. I'm not doing any more body work on this thing. Well, at least that I know of yet. Okay, I'm gonna let those dry up and maybe sand it down a little bit more just for preparation for a primer, but I think we're ready to start spraying some primer on these parts. All right, so I got all my parts cut off the sprues, mold lines cleaned up, sanded down, and into primer, as well as the body. And this is another reason why we prime before we paint. So I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but you'll see a little bit of a shadow on the body line there that I sanded down. So I need to spend some more time wet sanding this car. So I'm going to be using this first primer coat as a guide coat, and I'll be using some emery boards and straight sanding sticks for my blocking, and then I'll be using some water with 1 drop of dish soap in there just to give it a little more lubricity as I'm wet sanding. So let's start doing that. All right, so then as we start to block sand, we can start to see our high and low spots a lot more effectively. So that's why I do that, because I could already see a little bit of the unevenness on the sides where I had sanded down the accent trim. But even when it looks flat, when you start to wet sand, you'll start to see some of the unevenness come through. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of this body sanded down and ready for another coat of primer and then paint. All right, so I got the rest of the car sanded down, and one thing you want to do, especially when you're doing a lot of block sanding, is once you're done with that, make sure you just go over it again with like a sanding sponge or something that's a little softer, just to soften up those edges, especially on curved spots where the flat is not going to get. Anyway, so I think we're ready for another coat of primer. All right, I've got my 3rd round of primer on there after priming and sanding. Just found a few more things I needed to smooth out. So while we're letting that dry up, we're gonna move on to some assembly. So let's start putting some stuff together. All right, we got the chassis and the engine all completely installed. Got do a little touch up on that. And if you're wondering why it's so sparse, again, this is going to be a photo op car, so because it has a little bit of a deadline attached to it, we're focusing more on completion rather than detail. So that's why it's kind of sparse on the chassis. But I think where the body is finally ready for some paint. So we've got it to where it needs to be. Mostly, again, a little bit of a deadline. So the paint, since it's a Starbird edition, it needs to flash a little bit. So I've chosen this Ford Viking Blue from Scale Finishes. So let's go spray some paint. All right, so with those last chrome pieces installed and the taillights painted, I am done with this build. And unfortunately, I'm not super happy with it. I struggled with a lot of things. I kept reactivating the paint. Like if I had some leftover paint on my glove, it would react with the paint if I would touch the car. I should have changed my gloves more often. So I kind of had to do some touch up on the paint with just airbrushing again. And then I got some extra glue on the side pipe here. Some of the pieces just didn't really fit very well, which is typical with some of these older kits. But all in all, it's okay. It's not too bad, but I would have liked it to have turned out a lot better than that. But that's where we're at. And this is just kind of a rough overview of how it will look with the bubble top on there. Kind of a neat design. But anyway, let me get this thing finished up and ready for the glamour shots, and that will do it for this build. So once again, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.